authors of this paper focus attention only on natural infection by storm of spike in the fetus. I can expect neurodegeneration and alteration of the function of neural physiological network. And also we have to remember that spike can inhibit genes that promote the differentiation. It acts at genetic level with inhibition of differentiation in the brain of fetus. Next. So, to summarize, there is a lot of evidence that vaccine causes neurodegenerative disease, including Alzheimer, Parkinson, SLA, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. But what is important is make an investigation to prevent the brain damage in developmental brain in the fetus and protect unborn children. Next. 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 This immunization could be catastrophic in terms of epidemic of neurodegenerative disease, in particular prionic disease. Next. And I have the bad use, as my friends know, I raise sometimes uncomfortable question. One question is, what would happen if immunization program leads to large-scale contamination of livestock food? This could be a field in the next Congress. What could happen? Because if the live food chain is affected, we could have problem as prion disease also in not vaccinated people. So, next. Next. Hello? Does it work? Okay, of course, the areas we largely talk about the responsibility of the government to put this genetic drug in the market. This is a crime, of course, a crime against humanity, and I have to thank all of you to stand against it. Next. Next. As usual, I conclude my presentation with the honor of Luc Montagnier, that was a friend of us, and he stand through and give us the strength to, his example will survive with us. Next, I conclude also with a spiritual message. Next, because we know all of you are warriors in light, and sometimes some of us are a little bit discouraged, but we know that we already won. The final victory is our, and they not prevalebut, that Latin means they will not prevail. God bless you all, Romani, and all your country.
While we're queuing up, I can tell you're still digesting, so we're going to wake up a little bit, right? Yeah, okay, let's wake up. We're going to, a little science, a little humor, a little philosophy. I don't expect you to become a pathologist in the next 20 minutes or a statistician, but hopefully you'll walk away from this with a message that's important. I want to thank the amazing heroes here in Romania, the people, the members of parliament. I want to thank the organizers, Lily, Robbie, all the staff, including the lunch staff that fed us so nicely. And I want to thank all of you for teaching us, all of us learning together. So it's fantastic to be here. How far have we come in 3 years, yet how far do we still have to go? So I think it's important that we're still here and standing strong together, and each day another person joins us. And that's what's important, waking up our brothers and sisters on this wonderful planet Earth, one person at a time, and sometimes we make big leaps, but I think we're at a tipping point. So whatever you do, don't lose hope, don't lose optimism, and don't lose the opportunity to help somebody through this international crisis that we continue to face. Is there an emergency with COVID? I guess I'm just gonna freeform it. This is a speaker jazz. I don't have my slides yet. And, oh, they're there? Oh, they're coming. Okay, that's okay. I just get to talk and look at beautiful people from around the world. This is great. So I just get to be an observer. And really, I mean, think about it. I mean, how far so many have come from different parts of this earth to be together and just stand together in truth. And again, thank you to the beautiful people of Romania for having us here. You guys have been really an inspiration to all of us. And I think a lot of the world can learn from you. Okie dokie, I have no conflicts of interest, so rock and roll, here we go. It is dangerous to be right in matters about which the established authorities are wrong. And that's why we're here. And we're speaking the truth, and we're speaking truth to power, and we're going to continue to do so. And in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. We kind of ironically live in an era of wealth and hellness, not health and wellness. So let's change that. Let's get back in the right direction. We know where the wealth is, and it's combined in the hands of a few, and they're putting hell upon the people of the earth. So let's get back to what medicine really was and what medicine really should be. And here's another challenge we have in what we're doing as groups, disparate groups around the world. We tend to be aiming inward at each other from time to time. We need to stop our circular firing squads. You know, ready, fire, aim is not what we should be doing. Ready, aim, fire is what we need to do. We need to fire outward at those who are oppressing the people, oppressing systems, oppressing good medicine. So remember where to aim if you're going to aim. And if you're going to fire, which I hope we don't have to literally do so, but let's do the right thing. Let's help each other, encourage each other. You know, there's people in the movement that are a little peripheral and out there in some of their thinking. Forgive them that. Find common ground. Let's work together. Okay, and here's medicine, big pharma, and many of you may remember the first day of med school. A patient cured is a customer lost. Yeah, I think that's a problem. This is how our system is operating anymore. And if we're truly going to find health and wellness, then any good doctor worth his or her salt should put themselves out of business by making every patient that they have so healthy that they don't need their doctor. That's what medicine should be. Doctors should end up just being a coach you only need from time to time. Yet here we are in a world where genetic injections continue to be given in parts of this world with all risk and zero benefit. And we'll go over that. You've already seen some of that. Synthetic DNA and synthetic RNA injections are not vaccines. They're not. They're genetic therapies. If you look at the filing with the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States of Moderna, it is registered as a gene therapy. So you can call a frog a dog, but it's still a frog. And you can call a toad a cat, but it's still a toad. So if we continue to call something what it's not, that's how the people are duped. Our own CDC in the United States redefined vaccines several times to hide from the people what they were trying to get away with. So let's call a spade a spade. Let's call it what it is. These are genetic therapies. And I wouldn't even call them therapeutic at this point. These are genetic injections, and somebody will have to argue the therapeutic effect. And if you disagree with me, fantastic. I invite you to sit down for coffee or lunch, bring better data than I have or my colleagues have. We are open to dialogue. Somehow the crickets keep chirping. Dr. Trazi already showed this. The more shots you get, the more COVID you get. Are they working? They're not working, are they? Well, let's look at this. Very simple. So the shot that's out right now is for XBB 1.5. And what's the percentage of XBB 1.5 in the United States right now? Well, Pfizer came out with their new autumn pumpkin spice booster. You know, what's the flavor of the season? Let's give them the new shot. Yet this variant is almost extinct. So we're giving expired shots for extinct variants. And literally, children in Brazil 6 months and up are being mandated to receive this. Can you imagine that? That we're going to give a shot for something that doesn't exist, that doesn't work anyway, and is all risk and zero benefit. And people will get thrown in jail for fighting that in Brazil. Isn't that crazy? In other parts of the world, there are doctors and hospitals in Canada being mandated to get this pumpkin spice booster that doesn't work for something that doesn't exist. Can you imagine that? Is this where the mind of humanity has gone? And I'd like to thank Dr. Fauci for posing this, for this photo, because trying to keep up with the coronavirus with the vaccine is like trying to pick a booger through your mask. You're just not going to reach it. And that's what's happened with coronavirus vaccines. And those of us in the know who've done immunology and virology and vaccinology and pathology have always known that you can't vaccinate against coronaviruses. You will never keep up with the coronavirus. I'd like to quote the great physicist Richard Feynman. He said, "For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled." No judgment. If you got a shot, if you've got one, don't get two. If you got two, don't get three. If you've got three, don't get four. If you never got one, please never get one. We've already all kind of figured out how our body has hijacked those who receive these with a lipid nanoparticle and a gene sequence, and your cells end up making this foreign protein from this RNA sequence. But it's important to remember, human cells are meant to make human proteins. Your cells were never intended to make foreign proteins. Anytime your cells do that, they're going to be attacked by your own immune system. Plain and simple. It's a bad idea from the word go. It is a bad construct. It is a bad construct as a vaccine. Now, perhaps for, inborn errors of metabolism or other genetic disorders, it's useful. But for mass use on a population around the world, this is insanity. This is insanity. And if the clowns are in charge, you get a circus. And that's what we have. The cells do not lie. The cells do not lie. What does a pathologist do? We look at cells. We look at the patterns. The cells tell the truth. What's happening under the microscope is objective reality. So let's see what's happening under the microscope. Well, obviously, the needle goes into the arm, thanks to the late, great Dr. Burkhart, my mentor, my friend, God rest his soul. Here, the needle goes into the muscle in the arm. Obviously, you have blood vessels that get torn. These lipid nanoparticles go everywhere. And then they start hijacking the cells of the human body to make spike proteins. So in the laboratory, we have special techniques. All these little brown dots, that's expression of spike protein. But the lipid nanoparticle, does it stay in the arm? No, we know it doesn't stay in the arm. It goes everywhere. Lipid nanoparticles in and of themselves are highly inflammatory, let alone the protein that is being expressed. And what I'm talking about isn't just the COVID shots. Keep in mind that the powers that be want to use this technology going forward for other pathogens, for flu, for RSV, for tuberculosis, for HIV, you name it. There are countless pathogens in the pipeline and gene sequences. But never forget, your cells are meant to make your proteins, not foreign proteins. And so Dr. Bridle here was very astute and got the information by FOIA request out of Japan. And where do those lipid nanoparticles go? Well, everywhere. And where do they concentrate? That line going upward, that's the ovaries. A young woman, when she is born, will have all the eggs she will ever have. So is it a good idea for something foreign to be going to the reproductive future of the next generations? I would conjecture no. And in this study, notice it was going upward when they stopped the study and sacrificed these mice. When they cut the study off, it was still concentrating and going up. I think that's a point that's sometimes lost on this piece of information. It's also important to note that if you look at the constituents in Moderna and Pfizer, the lipid nanoparticles in and of themselves, if you look at their own safety data sheets, it says these are not for human or veterinary use. Well, 5 billion people got them. So who violated the safety recommendations? Well, all the regulatory agencies in the world did. All the regulatory agencies in the world, not for human or veterinary use. Now, I don't see any animals in this room, I only see people, and it's not for your use. It's not for the piggies or the cows or the chickens or the ducks. It is not, it's for research. That's it. So again, we've been lied to, we've been deceived, people have been harmed, and we need to recognize those harms, and we need to continue to figure out how to help those people. And is this mRNA? Well, we're all making messages right now. mRNA, you know, we hear mRNA. You all have mRNA, all of us. We're making bones, we're making muscle, we're making different proteins and peptides for all the function of your body as we sit here. That's a little message. This is synthetic engineered, methylated pseudouridine. And it doesn't break down. So Dr. Roltgen out of Stanford, in their study, they showed at least 60 days later, in a certain percentage of people, this was still persisting and still making spike protein. Now, they stopped their study to publish at 60 days, and there's still not a good study that shows how long the synthetic RNA persists in the human body. And then Dr. Brogna and his cohort showed that the vaccinal spike protein was circulating at least 6 months after the last injection. At least. How much longer than that is it circulating? We still don't know. We still don't know. So aren't these things we should have answered before one human being ever received one of these? Of course. Did anybody get informed consent that we're going to put an altered synthetic gene in your body? We don't know how long it'll last. We don't know how long it will produce a foreign protein. We don't know any of these things, and yet, through force of psychological warfare, as Dr. Malone points out, through fear, through coercion, millions and billions acquiesced. And that spike protein, I'm going to go through this quickly because I'm laying the foundation for cancer. It is the Swiss Army knife of harm, that spike protein. So don't think just spike protein, think lipid nanoparticle and foreign protein, because any foreign protein from other injections that they want to push on humanity are going to have the same potentials for harm. So don't just think spike protein. But let's go over spike protein real quick. Does it cause neurologic harm? Obviously, we just had an excellent lecture on that. It causes a lot of neurologic harm. Brown dots, spike protein. Vessels in the brain, Dr. Moore's study out of Germany, spike protein in the brain. Does it belong there? No, it doesn't. Your brain is a protected space. Dr. Burkhart's study, spike protein in the brain. Spongiform encephalopathy, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, crazy cow, like she said, mad cow disease. All those holes, that Swiss cheese, that's the brain tissue falling apart and causing big empty open spaces. This is a 34-year-old young man in Australia after his third shot who died. And this is one I diagnosed in my laboratory. And you can see the brown dots, spike protein. Peripheral nerves, plenty of peripheral neuropathy. It gathers in the nerves as well. All the pink dots in this picture, spike protein from my laboratory. Organ damage, and I don't mean just the church organ. Yes, it causes organ damage. It accumulates in the liver. It causes autoimmune disease. Now, this is fascinating. In 2005, when vaccines were being developed, which never made it to humanity, in 2005, it was known that if you use the full sequence of the spike protein, it can induce harmful immune or inflammatory responses. And yet, the powers that be, the scientists in the big industries, decided they were going to use the whole spike protein and ignored history from 18 years ago, knowing that it would cause problems. We had an excellent lecture on the heart a few minutes ago. On the left, lymphocytes chewing up heart muscle, again from Dr. Burkhart's series. And from Dr. Burkhart's series, here we have spike protein strongly expressed in cardiac cells. And then we have a negative control of the nucleocapsid. No, this isn't a viral infection. This is post-vaccinal. And in many of the autopsy studies that were done by the Pathology Institute in Germany, there were spike proteins being expressed up to 4 months after the previous injection. So again, persistence in the human body, plenty of an increase in coronary artery disease. Coronary disease in all age cohorts in the United States is increased right now. Cardiac disease across all age cohorts is increased above that baseline average. Does it go to the adrenal glands? People have talked about POTS syndrome, blood pressure problems, etc. Well, your adrenal glands are very important for many functions in the body, including your glucocorticoids, your mineralocorticoids, etc. Controlling your blood pressure is critically important. So it goes both to the cortex and the medulla of the adrenal. Here's a young man, 17, passed away, spike protein in the adrenals. Here's a 34-year-old lady, spike protein in the adrenals. Dysautonomia, so many other conditions. That spike protein accumulates any and everywhere. Wherever it lands, it can produce spike. Oh, what about reproductive harms? Let's look at this. This is critically important. This is critically important, and I'll go over some of Moderna's own information in a second. Dr. Burkhart's series, and there you can see my mentor and friend over there on the right. This is placenta. Do you think the placenta is important? Of course it is. It gives life. See all the brown dots? That's spike protein in the placenta. What about the endometrium? Any problems with menstrual abnormalities after these shots? Worldwide, you bet there is. That's all spike protein in the glands of the uterus, in the endometrium. What about the testes? What about the sperm? That's spike protein in the sperm and in the testes. What about this individual? That's spike protein in the testes. Now, I like to joke, you might want to consider that unvaxxed sperm might be the next Bitcoin. What about viral reactivation? I think this is the most under-recognized paper of the whole pandemic. And this should have halted the program early on. And this was Dr. Fosse out of the Netherlands. And they noted after 2 Pfizer shots, a deeply concerning alteration of the function of the innate immune system. That's your immediate immune system. Everybody talks about antibodies. I say antibodies, schmantibodies. You want strong Marines on the front line. That's your innate response. And when that shuts down and those Marines get drunk and go back to the barracks, then your immune system isn't fighting off the things it should. So we saw increases in RSV out of season. We saw metapneumovirus. We saw pneumonias out of season. Usually we think of fall and winter as flu and cold season. It's really low vitamin D season, as Dr. Anderson will tell you. But we have problems because the immune system has been altered and suppressed by these genetic injections. We put blinders on the horse of the immune system. It can only see that original spike that it's been injected with. It has difficulty seeing new variants because we've narrowed the response of the immune system. And this is the important one, IgG4. And this is where I say antibody, schmantibody. Some are good, some are bad. Now, there are plenty of papers around the world that show after several mRNA injections, the amount of IgG4 that's being produced is vastly concerning. So I'm a beekeeper on my farm. I have a little organic farm, and we do all sorts of the fun farming stuff. And that's my youngest a couple years ago, pretending to be a bee, and I still try to take care of her too. As a beekeeper, if I get stung, it hurts. I'll get itchy. I'll get an allergic reaction. Next time I get stung, my immune system doesn't want to hyperreact, or at least I don't want it to. I want it to calm down and recognize that venom as an allergen. Or, in the springtime, we'll all get stuffy noses from the pollen. We want to be able to tolerate that. And so your immune system over time, it wants to recognize things and say, okay, I've been exposed to that. I'm just going to calm down and not react. So IgG4 helps your body do this. But when we get these shots, am I done already? And that wasn't my beep, was it, Robbie? Oh, okay, good. Okay, this is somebody's phone. Okay. So normally you have about 1.5% IgG4. After these shots, individuals have 40% IgG4. And that has grave implications for the human body. You want to tolerate allergens, you don't want to tolerate pathogens, because next time a pathogen comes along in that same family, your immune system's going to tolerate it, and your body is a sitting duck for replication of that new variant of a virus to take over and do a lot of harm to the body very quickly. And so what does this add up to? It adds up to immune suppression, pathogen tolerance, and decreased tumor surveillance. It signals the cells that would normally, everybody in this room right now has atypical cells in their body, and if you have a competent immune system, your T cells are shaking hands with every cell in your body saying, are you a friend or are you a foe? Oh, you're a foe, you got a problem, I'm gonna throw a little hand grenade inside you, poke you with a hole, throw a hand grenade in and blow you up, and we're not gonna worry about you because now you're gone. But once this mechanism kicks into place, the cells that do that can't do that with the vigor and the rigor they're used to doing. Of course, we've already talked a little bit about the clots. Everybody has heard about this. We're finding more and more what some of the protein makeup of these are. Stay tuned. There's some interesting genetic information that just came out, but I'm not going to share that today because we have a few more studies to do. Amyloid. This is a very difficult to break down protein. We know the spike protein is causing this. These are amyloidogenic. That's a protein you don't want to have. There are techniques we can use in the laboratory now to detect this at a microscopic level. Calamari, those from Italy, there's some calamari. No, those are clots, and they are really fibrous. And there's, again, some interesting data coming out on some of the sequences that are creating some of these atypical proteins, causing these very rubbery clots. And these are happening in the living as well. Is it happening to everybody? Are all these things happening to everybody? No, that's the good news. That's the good news. Dr. Schmeling et al. Out of Denmark showed about a third of people essentially got duds. 2/3 got something that gave them mild, moderate reactions. But 4 to 5% of individuals is a lot of humanity. Or if you look at the CDC V-Safe data, about 7% of people had severe reactions that sent them to the urgent care or the hospital. So that's a high percentage of people when you take 5 billion people that receive these. Okay, let's talk about the monster in the room now. So what are some of the cancer mechanisms that we know can be induced and caused by the spike protein, by lipid nanoparticles, by atypical gene sequences, by some of the things I'm going to show you with DNA contamination in a second? Well, certainly gene mutations, a hypoxic environment, including wearing a mask and having retained carbon dioxide. Good studies out of Germany on that. And know what cancer loves? It loves a hypoxic environment. It really does. One more risk of masking. Chronic viral infections are reactivated because of that alteration of the immune system. Some of these are cancer-causing viruses or cancer-triggering or cancer-promoting viruses. Low interferon levels, that's induced by the spike protein, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read all of these, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is just what the pathologist thinks about. Right, what's turbocancer? Everybody's heard that now, right? Turbocancer, turbocancer. It's a colloquial term. It's not a medical term. But what oncologists around the world are noting, and then of course, you'll get factcheck.org, so then they said this, we fact-checked them. No, they didn't. They opinion-checked. They're opinion makers. They're narrative enforcers. They're not fact-checkers. And I would like to emphasize the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And if you can question it, it's science. And if you cannot question it, it's propaganda. And very simply, you cannot find what you don't look for. And so all these naysayers and critics, that doesn't exist, turbocancer doesn't exist. Well, let's look together real quickly. Oncologists, this is Dr. Dalgleish out of the UK, one of the leading cancer researchers in the UK. Countless oncologists everywhere go in the world say, we are seeing it, we are seeing it, we are seeing it. Don't quit telling the truth in our practices. First we saw the clots, then we saw the leukemias and the lymphomas and the blood cancers, and now we're seeing an increase in solid tumors, and I'm going to show you some data sets in a second. So turbocancer is basically cancer not behaving. It's cancer acting more aggressively than it should. And countless pathologists and oncologists and internists and family doctors, you can talk to 20 doctors in this room and they'll tell you in their patient cohort, they're seeing patients where this is happening and it shouldn't be. And it's growing quickly and it's spreading quickly. And some patients are presenting stage 4 disease, which is insane. The spike protein binds to the p53 gene. That's the guardian of your genome. It's your tumor suppressor gene. And here we have a lymphoma. This is from Dr. Burkhart's series. Every cell in that lymphoma is filled with spike protein. Here in my laboratory, we had a pancreatic cancer. Every cell in that cancer is expressing a spike protein. Now that's concerning because that pattern suggests something called integration. I'll get to that in a second. Here's a patient that had a angioblastic lymphoma. 3 weeks after his booster on the right, you can see his tumor burden. What happened to his immune system? It forgot how to fight. All right, I'm not going to go through too much information. Let's just see if you can recognize patterns. Does anybody see a line going upward? Yeah. When did it start? In 2021. So this is statistics on cancer deaths. And I'll be darned, after something was mandated in most of the countries in the world, cancer rates went up. Let's look at this one. Does anybody see a line going up? I'll be darned, same thing. Let's look at a different data set. Cancers of ill-defined and secondary sites. In 2021, did something happen? Sure did. And then malignant neoplasms in the age 0 to 54, the younger age group where you don't expect cancers. What happened in 2021? Something's going up. What about the American Cancer Society? The data sets indicate 11.5% above expected averages. But let's look at the UK disability data sets. And this is great work from Ed Dowd and his group Finance Technologies. In 2020, there was about a 2-ish% increase in cancer. In 2021, there's about 6-7%. By 2022, in the disability data sets, there was a 35%, almost 36% above expected average cancer disability rate. Let's look at the youth, those that don't die from cancer. 10 years of data here, ages 15 to 44. Ages 15 to 44, deaths from cancer. 10 years of data. Does anyone see a blip in 2021 and then 2022? That's not a blip. That is a giant screaming signal. Look at the vaccine adverse event reporting system. All vaccines combined reported secondary consequence associated with the vaccine, cancer rates about 95, 100 a year. 15 times that reported, 15 times that once the COVID shots rolled out. Well, the government's like, well, there's nothing to see here. These are not the droids you're looking for, turn away. This is the proportionality risk ratios. Anything in the yellow is a screaming signal. I'm not going to go through all of them. 9 out of 10 cancers, 9 out of the 10 most common cancers, 9 out of the 10 screaming signal that our regulatory agencies ignored and said, nothing to see here, folks, don't worry about it. We'll just ignore statistics. We'll ignore our job because safe and effective and no one is safe until everyone's safe, blah, 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 blah. That's a signal. That's not a signal. That's a baseball bat hitting you over the head. Well, what about the purity of these products? The vials were looked at by the European Medicines Agency. They were only 50% pure RNA. They were fragmented. They were broken down. In Australia, they found the same thing. And yet, what did they say? Everybody get one. We have a contaminated, impure product, and everybody just go ahead and get one because we say so. Well, microRNA is a known carcinogen. It's a known carcinogen. Not only RNA, but as we've been told, the plasmid DNA story. Now, I want to show you some of Moderna's own information here. Not only contaminated with these DNA plasmids, they're also contaminated with endotoxins from the bacteria in which they're grown. And they told you that these were pure products, you're getting synthetic RNA, ta-da, no problem, yay, humanity cured, right? Wrong. So they used PCR in Pfizer's trials. Moderna started with the bacterial growth and that technique. And they told you were getting RNA. No, these were contaminated with DNA. They baited and switched. They did a study on 40,000 patients with synthetic RNA made by PCR, and about 252 patients were looked at the very end of the trial with the new technique of growing them in bacteria. And they didn't see any safety problems because they only had 252 patients. And we've seen this paper already from Dr. Speaker, Jessica, who I'm looking forward to hearing, Maria Gucci, David Weissman, Kevin McKernan. Every vial that's been looked at has contamination of DNA. Who knew about it and who knows about it? US FDA, Canadian FDA, European Medicine Agency, the TGA in Australia. They all know. They all know they're contaminated. They all know they're contaminated. So did people around the world get informed consent? I think that's a valid question to ask. They had the sequences. They didn't care much, did they, to tell you what was in them or what wasn't? They have a promoter and a nuclear co-localization sequence of the simian virus number 40 from the green monkey here, cute little monkey, but the virus they carry is a known to be carcinogenic virus. Now, do these have the whole virus, these vials? No, but they have sequences from them. And this is important. This was disclosed. The agencies knew these were in there, but we even found the fact that there's herpes simplex virus sequences in these. So these are all contaminated, adulterated products. You know, if a child dies from a crib breaking or 2 children die, those are pulled off the market. We have protective agencies that make sure we receive safe products in society in most nations in the world. And yet these still exist. These are still out there being put into the bodies of humans. This is absurd. Again, put clowns in charge and you get a circus. It's time to replace the clowns. Again, there's not entire virus in these. These are sequences, but the agencies, normally you allow for about 10 micrograms of DNA in certain genetic products. These happen to be wrapped in fat. The old rules don't apply to the new technology. The fat protects the DNA. The DNA can persist. The DNA can go everywhere, just like the RNA. It persists. It persists. All the regulatory documents up to this point are irrelevant with this new technology. But these are not the droids you're looking for. Move along now. Do you think we've been lied to? I think so. Dr. Malone brought this one up. In Moderna's own patent, they say naked plasmid DNA, and keep in mind, this isn't naked plasmid, this is protected plasmid DNA, has the risk of insertional mutagenesis and can lead to the activation of oncogenes, cancer genes. Moderna knew this. Oh, guess what? Let's look at some more patents from Moderna. The DNA template used in the mRNA manufacturing process must be removed to ensure the efficacy of therapeutics because residual DNA in drug products may induce activation of the innate response and has the potential to be oncogenic, cancer-causing in patient populations. Oh, let's look at the risk of the endotoxins from the bacteria from Moderna's patent. Endotoxin contamination is detrimental to patient safety and therefore a process that introduces endotoxin into a drug substance is generally not viable for use in patients. Hundreds of billions of copies of contaminating DNA are present in each vial. Think of the number of individuals that got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots. That's 1 trillion copies of contaminating DNA. And what can that do? Well, in certain studies, about 7% of cells transfected with pieces of DNA can stably integrate into the genome. Can stably integrate into the genome. What about this little promoter from this monkey virus? Guess what? That same cancer-protecting gene that you have, P53, it can bind to that as well. Not just the spike protein, but this little monkey virus promoter sequence can also trigger those same pathways. Is this a good idea? I conjecture no. So here we have this enhancer region, this plasmid DNA, and uh-oh, it's getting into the nucleus of your cell, the command center, and it can park next to the nucleus and or potentially integrate into your own genes. Again, remember, P53 is the guardian of your genome, just like the guardians of the galaxy. So we have contaminating genes, P53 binding, increased cancer data signals. What does this mean? Well, I think the conclusion is fairly obvious to the most casual observer. But let's see what Comirnaty said. They said in their package insert, oh, no gene toxicities have been provided, studies have been provided. This is acceptable as the components of the vaccine are lipids and RNA and are not expected to have genotoxic potential. Oh, but guess what? It isn't RNA, is it? It's DNA. There's a lie. Well, let's look up at Pfizer. Well, they're not expected to have genotoxic potential. Oh, yeah, it's just lipids and RNA. So we don't have to do cancer testing. Generally not considered necessary. Don't worry about it. Look the other way. Yet governments mandated that their population got this without knowing the long-term risk. And a gene product normally takes 5 to 15 years to get to market so we can see these signals. Are we 5 years into this yet, folks? We sure aren't. What's yet to come? I don't know. And that's the honest answer. Do I want to be wrong? 100%. I wish I were wrong. But this is science. Almost done, Robbie. First, do no harm. We took that oath, not to a government, not to an agency, not to some petty dictator. We took an oath to the patient. Real medicine is honoring the patient. And at this point in the game, I think we should first do no harm. Life's tragedy is that we get old too soon and wise too late. And there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, and the other is to refuse to believe what is true. And at this point, if you're going to fight, fight like you're the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark, and brother, it's starting to rain. Don't be like the ostrich on the left. Don't be blinded. Pull your head out. Stay awake. Be like the ostrich on the right. That's our obligation to our fellow human beings. Be awake. So, conclusions. All these shots must be stopped now. All of them. Not just for COVID, but going forward for any pathogen. Governments have to open their cancer databases. The information is there. We know what's happening. We've luckily gotten into a few of them, but too much of the data is being hidden. Trust is very simple in life. It's truth plus transparency. That equals trust. And integrity is very simple as well. It's the distance between your lips and your actions. That's what integrity is. Informed consent must be returned to medicine. Public health has to be reformed. We have to return to health and wellness, not wealth and hellness. And if you truly want to follow the science, then follow the silenced. And I want to conclude, I've got two more thoughts. May we as a group have the strength of the stool and the faith of this dog. Because that's where we are. Mulțumesc from my daughters and my family and the opportunity to be here. And real quick, I want to show a quick video. MP Terrace has been a hero in the fight. He was recently in Vienna. I've got a quick video to show. There will be a gathering in Geneva at the Place des Nations on June 1st. You can go to doortofreedom.org or europeforfreedom.org. It will be at the conclusion of the World Health Assembly. I think it's critical that we show up in mass to protest the, like Robert says, the Mandarins in charge. I think we need to combat what's happening. We need to have our voices heard. It's fun to meet with each other and like-minded individuals, but we need to be out in public saying it strongly as well. So I have a real quick video. I hope it plays here. Hopefully you can hear it, a little volume. There we go. Well, maybe not. Okay. Well, I was afraid that was going to happen. So technology, like I said, in Feynman's words, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled, neither can technology, and I am a fool when it comes to technology at times. So thank you very much. Stay strong, stay loving, be happy, be kind. We're in this together, and don't forget to reach out. Forgive those who need forgiveness, love those who need loving. This is about community, this is about the human family, and that's what we are. God bless. Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'm Giovanni Freghese from Rome, University of For Italico, so I'm another one of the Italian gang that is present over here. I'm actually very happy, we're in a big sort of number, because at least, we don't feel alone as we've felt at the beginning of this whole story. Now, if you could please project my slides, I'll begin, as time is running short. So my talk is going to be about human reproduction and nanovaccines. A flashing red light is being ignored. So I'm going to actually talk about certain things that were mentioned before by Dr. Prego and by Ryan Cole just now. Now, this has been like this from the beginning. So I'll very quickly recap certain things you already heard before. So these products are actually not vaccines. They should be called a prodrug. That's because upon a certain manipulation, which means translation within the ribosome, they produce a spike protein. That's a pharmacological effect. Normal vaccines don't have pharmacological effects per se, but they are actually able to trigger immune formation of antibodies and recognition. So actually, this is where most of the problems began, by characterizing it as a vaccine when it's not a vaccine, it's a prodrug. And because of the characterization as a vaccine, it has jumped all those studies that normally are actually done for pharmaceutical products. So, as you already heard, they do not stay in the shoulder, they go everywhere. We knew this, though, from the beginning. Now, I had occasion of showing this in 2021 at the Italian Senate, and it was taken from the TGA, and it shows the biodistribution of the MT-LMPs in the rat. As you can see, it goes within 48 hours. It was showed by Dr. Cole just now. It goes very high into adrenal glands. It goes extremely high into the ovaries as well. On the same data, you can see down there was actually another warning sign that got completely ignored, which was the pre-implantation loss. It was double what was the control. So they had already a flashing red sign that something was going to happen with reproduction and these vaccines from day one, but it was completely hidden with a wall of lies. The first one was that the product remains in the shoulder. We all know that that is simply impossible because they're nanoparticles. Here, I have actually joined a few papers, and I'm going to take you through them very quickly. The first one has been done by my colleague and friend, Professor Marco Cosentino, and he did a survey trying to understand, talking to people, how many women had menstrual issues after the vaccination. Turns out that 60% at the second dose had problems. Of those 60%, about 50% had problems for a couple of months, then they got resolved, and another 50% got on for a much longer period of time. How long, we yet don't know. We already know that COVID by itself is actually going to interact with the reproductive system because that's published data, but the same thing is actually being published for the vaccine, but not many people are actually taking care of it. So while the influence of the menstrual cycle is actually, it begins to get very well known and documented, and it's going to get actually messier as I go on with the explanation. Regarding the male, we have conflicting data, which is actually very interesting because I've seen colleagues writing papers saying that if you do take this shot, the number, the concentration and the motility of the sperms actually increase, which, it's kind of fun if you think about it because it's not supposed to actually have any effect over there, but according to some colleagues, it actually increases the values. Now, to let you understand how complex the issue is, that's an issue of andrology. You can actually see there from T0 to T3 the different parameters of the semen, concentration, number, and motility. Now, it's extremely interesting because if you see over there sperm concentration, it goes to -14, -15, and it remains -15. But if you read the paper, you actually read that there is a fall in concentration of sperm, but it gets back to normal. Their own data are actually saying something entirely different, but if you read the paper, it's clearly stated. So I don't know if they're not able to read their own numbers, but you can actually understand what this means. It means that even the same researchers, they actually showed the numbers and they had to say something different in the paper. You know why? Because otherwise it wouldn't be published. And this is something we're still dealing with. There's a huge problem in getting the okay from the ethical committees in studies that we want to do, and that there is open hostility from the colleagues from whenever you mention the word vaccine. This is another paper. This actually shows that it's even more common than we thought. It's about 78% of the study sample had menstrual changes. That's about 80%, which means it's a lot more common than not common. Interestingly, they recorded the symptoms that's in those people, and you have increased fatigue, abdominal bloating, irritability, sadness, and headaches. Now, the sadness probably it connects to what was Rosanna saying before about the nervous system. there were more menstrual bleeding, more menstrual pain, delayed menstruation, fewer days of menstrual bleeding, and shorter cycle. Besides that, the VAERS system confirms all of this. I can tell you that, in my own personal experience, I've seen at least 3 young girls around 18 of age. They came to me, actually, they sent me their analysis, and they got a AMH at 0, which means they have no varic reserve of any kind, and they got FSH and LH, which are at around 150 FSH and 50 LH, which means clearly postmenopausal. So they're 18, they have no chance of getting children, and that happened within actually a few months of getting the shot. And people still think there is no connection with reproduction. I'm actually thinking, we are just scraping the surface of the issue, and this will be the topic of the upcoming years, together with the issue of the cancer that we've seen. But this goes far deeper. Because, there are 2 key issues that are actually playing together to get at reproduction level. I'm going to get to it, and so that at least I can share my worry with someone. This is another study made in Spain, and it shows, as science, actually real science, goes on, people try to understand for how long these things actually happen. And what came out of this is that, this study proves that most of these abnormal issues with menstruation actually do last for more than 5 months. So it's not transient, it's actually quite important. At times it can be permanent. Once again, you've seen something like this just earlier, but is to summarize, the other main lies that have been propagated to us. That is the data from the UK. They stopped releasing them in this format, after they realized what they were showing. Anyway, you have in red people ever vaccinated, accounting for COVID deaths, and in green the non-vaccinated. And it accounts for 93% vaccinated and 7% unvaccinated. I think it talks by itself, and still people are saying that the vaccine saved millions of lives. It's very interesting. Now, what you see over there is actually the fall of conception in Sweden. Strangely enough, I'm pretty sure it's a coincidence, it begins 9 months after the rollout of the vaccines, and it drops the way you're seeing. So that's another indirect, proof that we are actually dealing with something a lot more complex than previously thought. The first time I went into the Italian Senate, it was 2.5 years ago, I was saying, because you call these vaccines, and normally a vaccine, of course, it doesn't get into the cell, it doesn't get into the nucleus, it doesn't do anything, so it's logical not to do carcinogenic or, genotoxicity studies. But it's an entirely different issue. As it was just said by Dr. Ryan Cole, they had to change actually the definition of vaccines in the States. In Europe, it was actually easier because if you look at what gene therapies are, there is a flow chart. If you look at the flow chart, it says, are we talking about DNA or RNA? Yes, okay, then go on. It could be, a genetic therapy. And then it says, is it for an infectious disease? If the answer is yes, then the answer is no. It's not gene therapy. That's all there is. That someone has decided with a flow chart that because we are targeting an infectious disease, then it's not gene therapy and it's a vaccine. At least in the States, they had to change the definition 2 or 3 times to adjust it to what they actually gave us. Now, this is, the point I always try to bring back again, because to me, this represents, really the moment that science died, which is when you actually have the European agency, if you ask them, can I actually get these shots while I'm pregnant? And they say, oh yes, please do, can be used. But they started saying this without having any sort of data whatsoever, because, pregnant people, as frail people, actually, they were completely outside of the experimentation, which means we had no data. So in the moment that actually the body that is supposed to watch over our health is going to say that it's okay to vaccinate someone being pregnant, which is, the most frail and probably important stage of our lives, because we're dealing about the future, and this has been said, please go on without any sort of data, and I mean zero. Yet it was rolled out everywhere. I don't know what happened to my colleagues, how people didn't realize, people that are gynecologists, pediatricians, and people in academic institutions, they went on in television, on radio, on newspapers saying, please go, it's very important you get vaccinated when you're pregnant. On the basis of faith, because this is what it has become. We are actually heretics for being here. And we probably have already paid a price for it, and we'll pay some others. So, I would like to ask that, to Emmer Cook, one of the guys actually at EMA, asking, on which studies have you said that, this is actually possible? It's very simple, none. And this goes against the 18th point of the Declaration of Helsinki, where it says that physician cannot give it in an experimentation any substance for which they don't know everything. And about this, we know nothing. We know nothing about the pharmacokinetics, the pharmacodynamics, the biodistribution. Nothing has been done, with the false idea that it remained in the shoulder and it didn't go anywhere. Now, this is Professor Philip Buchholz, and he was testifying before the South Carolina Senate Medical Affairs. And, you can't hear him now, but he's actually quite worried about what he's seeing. And I'm getting back to what Dr. Cole was just saying. And I think if you actually put together the two pieces of information, which means there is a clear involvement with the reproduction system, both male and especially female. And in this vaccine now we find DNA plasmids that weren't supposed to be there. That spells for disaster, actually. This is the RT-PCR line showing you that, the DNA is actually present. It's been published in preprint. I don't know how long it's going to be before we actually see this printed on an article somewhere, because the contents are shocking. We are not talking about retrotranscription of RNA. We were discussing this with Dr. Malone last time when we were in Brussels, but this is a whole different game. Because in molecular biology, if you want to change something in DNA, what you actually do is you take a lipid, you put some DNA of this kind, you put a plasmid, a promoter inside, and the game is done. That's how actually you do it in the lab. So what they actually did, Professor Buchholz over there, he was saying, actually, he begins by saying, I am choosing to interpret this as a mistake, not as malice. And then he actually underlines it, I'm choosing not to see malice here. And what he's saying in this is, there could be malice, there is probably malice. I cannot tell you it's malice because I have no proof of that, but I choose even for my own soul, because in the end, he says, if I had known this information, I would have not vaccinated my daughter, which is one of the big issues of this whole story, because who wants to know what they actually have done, not just to themselves, but to their children and possibly for future generations? Because the issue, that people don't seem to realize is, if you put this into reproduction system and a possible transfection with DNA that stays permanent, it means you're actually creating a new species. A new species, it means a speciation, it means, as some people call themselves purebloods, and then you might have a different kind of humanity which is actually gene modified. I mean, what are the implications of this under health perspective, law perspective, ethical perspective, history perspective, actually? We're talking about something that might have already happened, and and we are here saying to people, not us, but in my country, in other countries, they're saying, oh, people are not getting the new updated booster. It's actually very bad. Doctors should push a lot more for this, so that they keep using this. But this data is not hidden anywhere. I know it. A lot of other people know it. People that actually understand a bit of microbiology or this sort of experiments actually understand what is happening here. Honestly, I don't want to stop and think too much about it, because otherwise my head spins. This was already shown to you, and I'm just pointing out that the promoter there, the SV40, should have never been there. the process now, you know, Dr. Cole just said it, you know, they used two different processes. The second one wasn't basically, they never gave all the data they were supposed to give to the agencies. So again, they actually asked for the data for the second method because they knew about it. It wasn't supplied to them, they did nothing. Yet, we are still here trying to push these products onto people. And in Brazil, they want to mandate this from 6 months on. I don't know if you realize, you know, I mean, we've already